What's up, guys? Obviously, it's CaptainObviouzX, and welcome to Conquering the Borderlands. Now, in today's episode, I'll be talking to you guys a little bit about corrosive damage and corrosive weapons in Borderlands 2. And now, there's a lot of people who are new to the game series who really have not gotten a feel for how to use the elemental damage weapons in this game. Those are corrosive, fire, slag, and, explosive can be an elemental variant, but for certain weapons such as Torgue weapons and rocket launchers, it's a normality there. But in today's episode, we're going to be focusing more on the corrosive damage in Borderlands 2, and primarily talking about how it should be used and which enemies it's actually more effective against in, the game, and how it compares to other weapons, and how they will affect the weapons and the enemies of which corrosive is very good against. Now, corrosive damage is the icky, gooey stuff that will corrode away at your enemy. Now, it's very, very cool. It's one of my more favorite elements. Back in Borderlands 1, it really was powerful versus pretty much any enemy type, except for the ones that were, immune to corrosive damage, such as the acid soldiers from the Crimson Lance. But now in Borderlands 2, they've really toned down the damage that corrosive does to pretty much any enemy type, to primarily focus on the ones who are armored, like the robots and the things like that in Borderlands 2. So that's why you see me primarily using my corrosive shotgun here against the loaders in the City of Opportunity, because you really want to use the corrosive damage against these things who have the, vulnerability to the corrosive damage that the weapons have. Now, what it will do is, over time, it'll take away a set amount of damage per second. And now, if you look at the item card on a weapon, it'll say, like 67.5 or 120 damage every single corrosive strike that is done against the enemy over time. Now, as your item level progresses and as you go up in levels, you'll be doing more corrosive damage over time against enemies. And that is one of the main things of corrosive weapons that really sticks out and makes it more powerful. If you have a regularly damaging weapon that does, 800 damage, and you have a corrosive weapon that does about 600 damage, usually you want to go for the corrosive one, because over time it'll be doing more damage per second than a normally damaged weapon that's just, common without any elemental augmentations there. So in general, you want to lean towards the elemental weapons primarily, unless you have a power that will make your normally damaging weapons that are not elemental do more damage. Now, I believe back in Borderlands 1 there was a skill called Trespass for the sniper, and that would allow any normal build without any elemental damage attached to it to completely pierce through shields and go right to health. Now, if there is a skill like that in Borderlands 2 right now, there may be something like that. On that class, or whichever one it is, you want to stay away from elemental weapons on that, specifically corrosive damage. Now, the reason I say that is because corrosive damage primarily will do less damage on impact and more over time. Fire damage and slag and, explosive on that, for that matter, will do most of their damage primarily, and then over time they'll still do a good amount of damage, but nothing matches the overtime and damage per second of corrosive. That's why the limiting, amount of people you can use corrosive damage on is so small, primarily focusing towards the robots and the machines in Borderlands 2. You can use fire against pretty much any enemy type except for the ones that are resistant to it. You can use it against robots, you can use it against humans, against creatures, anything fire will work against. Slag will work against pretty much everything. But corrosive, on the other hand, only has one primary strength, and that is against robots and machinery in Borderlands 2. So, in general, try to stick away from using corrosive damage on any weapon. You want to always have different elemental types in your overall weapon equipped categories. You want to make sure that in your bag you have different sorts of weapons and not only stick to one element, because that is very, very important. You have different weapons for different situations. You don't want to get caught fighting against an enemy who is resistant to the corrosive damage, yet you only have 4 corrosive weapons in your arsenal, which will really, really make a very bad thing for you when you're trying to get through the enemies as quick as possible. You're going to have to take a lot of time out of your questing to make sure you reel this enemy's health down to a point where you can melee him or something like that, because corrosive damage against a corrosive resistant enemy is extremely, extremely weak. It is very, very, don't even worry about using it against a resistant enemy to corrosive damage. You'll never do any significant amount of damage, and you're wasting your time doing it. Just make sure you have something to counter against enemies who are resistant to corrosive damage. Now, also, it's also a good idea to possibly have a slag weapon in conjunction with a corrosive weapon. Now, the reason I say that is because the slag damage will also double the damage your corrosive weapons do. So, over time, you'll be doing double the amount of damage you would be if you slide the enemy. So slide the enemy, hit him with a corrosive weapon, get that damage over time going. You'll do a lot of damage per second on your enemy, and it will really, really draw the enemy's health down if you're over an equal level to them. Now, in the gameplay right now, I'm, a lot higher than these other enemies, but if you're on an equal level to enemies, it'll do a lot of damage if you slag them and then corrode them. So that's pretty much it for today's episode of Conquering the Borderlands. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and you learned something a little bit new about how corrosive damage really works in Borderlands 2, and you'll think twice about when using it against a certain type of enemy. If you guys could thumbs this video up, I would really appreciate it. Follow me on Twitter, link is down in the description. And as always, rate, comment, and subscribe, and I'll see you guys later.